Hello, boys and girls. Today we're going to do lesson 2 of Colonial Towns in Townspeople. In lesson 1, we spoke about how people lived long time ago during colonial days. We talked about what the adults did and what the children did. Do you remember a chore the children did in colonial towns long time ago? Tell an adult. The purpose of listening for today's lesson is to listen for the different types of tradespeople that lived in colonial towns long time ago. In lesson 1, we ended with the discussion of how people during that time went to town to get things, to trade their goods for things that, maybe it will take too long to make. So they went to town and they would get new things to bring home to save time. Here are several pictures of different trades that people do. Everyone in these pictures are called a trade person. Here's a farmer. Here's a dressmaker, a tailor, a carpenter, a mechanic, a baker. Our first vocabulary word today is barter. Barter means to trade for goods instead of paying goods with money. So back then, there wasn't money. They traded their goods for other goods. Our next vocabulary word is blacksmith. A trade person who melts hot iron and uses tools to hammer, bend, cut, and shape the metal into a variety of objects such as horseshoes, tools, and cooking utensils. Our next vocabulary word is cobbler, a person who makes and fixes shoes. A shoemaker. Here's our next vocabulary word, everyday. Ordinary, something that happens nearly every day. On the farm, milking cows is an everyday event. It happens every day. Our next vocabulary word is rare. It's special, something unusual. It doesn't happen often. Happens once in a while. And our last vocabulary word is tailor. A person who makes and fixes clothes. A tailor. Imagine you lived in the country long ago where we're pretending to visit the nearest town. A trip to town was not an everyday event. 300 years ago, there were no cars or trains. Your parents would have taken you by horse and wagon, and the going was slow because you wouldn't have wanted to leave your animals alone or your crops uncared for at home for very long. For a very long time, trips to town were pretty rare. Why might you have needed to go to town? Normally, everyone in your family helped to make the most of what you needed on your farm. But there were always a few things that your family couldn't make themselves, like some iron nails or new pairs of shoes, or that would have simply taken too much time to make at home, like grinding wheat into flour or making clothes for a new dress or shirt. Fortunately, there were different kinds of tradespeople in town who were specialists at many of these jobs, jobs that couldn't have been done at home or that took too long. How would you have paid these tradespeople for the things you needed? Farmers usually brought a load of goods to sell, or he might have bartered or exchanged some eggs or butter for the clothes you needed to make new clothes. If you bartered products that you bought from your farm, you swapped or traded what you bought for something you wanted from the tradesperson. You would not pay money, you would trade. Like when you are playing with a toy and you see someone else playing with a toy that you want, you can trade your toy for their toy. You may have brought along some vegetables or even chickens to trade. The first stop on your trip to town, at least in the largest towns, most likely would have been at the town square. Most of the shops and the important buildings were located in or around the town square. Unlike the country, buildings in the town were close together, which made it possible for you to visit several shops on the same day. The town square was the place where the mayor and other town leaders made speeches or important announcements. The town square was also where townspeople met to talk and gossip with their friends. This was how people learned the latest news. From the town square, you probably headed to nearby trading post or general store. This was where farmers would buy, sell, trade all kinds of things. At the trading post or general store, you might have traded the vegetables, grains, or dairy products you brought with your tools, clothes, or supplies that you needed. If you were visiting a typical town in colonial days, here is where your trip to town would end. Most smaller towns had only one general store, a place where farmers would trade their crops to get basic tools and supplies. They could not make it they could not make at home. However, let us imagine that you were visiting a very large town where you could see, do, and do much more. If you looked near the river, you may have seen a mill, a building where wheat were ground between large stones to make large amounts of flour. Mills were almost always on the river because the flowing water was needed to turn the huge water wheel that made the large flat stones inside turn and grind the wheat. If you had visited the miller, no doubt you would have brought freshly harvested wheat or corn from your farm for the miller to grind into flour. Once it was ground into flour, you would have been able to take it home to bake bread, cakes, and other good things to eat. Next, you may have stopped in the baker's shop and brought freshly baked rolls and breads. What a treat for your family. If you were a rich farmer, you may have visited the hatter for a new hat or a dressmaker to buy a new dress for your daughter. Instead of buying clothes, you may have just bought yourself a new shirt from the tailor. You would have had to visit the all-important cobbler, who would have made you a new pair of strong leather shoes. The blacksmith was an important specialist in town, with his own set of tools and skills. The blacksmith built fires to melt iron so he could pound it into horseshoes, nails that you needed. He also worked hard to make many of the same metal tools that you use back on your farm. In the busy town, each of these tradespeople and merchants had something special to offer people who lived in the country, just as you had much needed fresh food to offer them. For the next few days, you'll be learning more about some of these special people. If you were an apprentice in the colonial days, and you can learn the job or trade of colonial tradesperson, which trade that you heard about today would you have wanted to learn and why? Tell a grown up. Why do farmers go into town? Why were trips to town rare instead of every day? Describe what you might see in town. I want you to finish this sentence. I can work as a. Think about a trade that you would want to do and complete the sentence. If Miss Bennett did it, I would say, I can work as a teacher. What can you work as in town? Have a fantastic day.